Well, hello. I just finished editing this interview with Owen Wiseman, who is a naturopath based in Canada. And something he talked about was so cool to dive into, something called environmental generational amnesia. And although I've heard of this concept, I never heard that term before. And what it really gets to is the more generations are spent in a urban type of environment and or disconnected to nature, the less there's even known what is missing from the human experience. So we dive into that a little bit. We also talk about nature as a active participant in our healing process, which is just so juicy and yummy. I love that. And he also shares how our experiences in childhood are really sensory memories. So if you think back to your childhood, you may have had experiences like this where you feel the slick algae of rocks as you're entering a lake, or perhaps the crisp snap of moisture on wood in a campfire. It activates all of our bodily senses. So I think you're really going to enjoy this. Owen is very articulate and very poetic in his language and relates it all back to human health and healing. So enjoy. Welcome, everybody. Today we have with us Dr. Owen Wiseman, and let me tell you a little bit about Owen. He's an award-winning naturopathic doctor, medical advisor, and leading advocate for nature therapy and ecopsychology. With a deep commitment to health span, the quality of life we experience as we age, he specializes in the science of how the choices we make shape long-term well-being. So welcome, Owen.
Oh, thank you so much, Maureen, for having me here.
Well, I'm excited. It's been just a short while since we met on LinkedIn, and we had a lovely conversation. So I always like to start with, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood in relationship to nature connection?
Yeah, it's like a therapy session, right? We sit down, tell me about your childhood. I think like many of us who are drawn to healing work, yeah, like you said, my story does start in childhood, though I would say I didn't know it at the time. So I grew up myself as the youngest of 13 grandchildren in a very tight-knit family. And for us, our family cottage was everything. It was our gathering place, it was our playground. And for me, it was the first place I think I ever felt completely at peace. Although as a kid, how much did I have to worry about? Um, you know, and I think in large part for me, it's kind of there was no Wi-Fi, there was no phones, there was no rush. So some of my most vivid memories growing up are sensory memories, right? The smooth algae slicked rocks that were underneath my feet, or the pop of cedar sap in the fire pit when you would put a wet cedar log in there. I have really fond memories of the echo of loon calls across the water, whether early in the morning or in the evening. And I think just that heavy feeling of summer air at right before that storm kind of rolls through across the water. We had this really big bay window at the cottage, so you could literally watch the storms, and they always came the same direction, right across the lake, and you would see the clear water and then the really shaken water as the rain just rolled through. So a lot of sensory experiences, but also for me, it was such a deep place of connection with my other cousins. You know, we floated up for hours on pool noodles, or we'd play hide and seek in the forest, or we'd tell ghost stories by firelight, and you'd have sparks kind of flying up into the night sky. So even though I didn't have a language for it then, something was happening to me. I think looking back and understanding a little bit more about the body and the anatomy now, my nervous system was calibrating, and it wasn't to clocks or screens, but really calibrating to the rhythm of the earth. And I think that was my earliest education in something I now call kind of ecological belonging. It's that deep, unspoken knowing that I was part of something bigger and wilder and wiser than myself, that nature wasn't just, outside of me. It was me. I am nature.
Wow, that is a really magical time. You can hear it in your voice, in your body, the way you express yourself, and the words you use are so poetic, really beautiful, Owen. I mean, I really could feel the experience of being in that cabin with all of those sensory, bodily felt experiences, and I think that is kind of that is the bridge, is our bodies. And so often in our modern world with technology, we're out of our bodies. And yet that may sound really odd to people, some people listening to this podcast, because, well, yeah, we're in our bodies all the time. We can't not be in our bodies. And we we associate being out of body with some kind of mystical transcendent experience, right? But actually being fully in our human bodies is a totally different way of experiencing our world, right?
Yeah, well, and what I realize now is that as a clinician, as an educator, those moments that regulated me before I ever, like I said, studied biology or nervous system states, I was learning then that through stillness, through dirt. I mean, we'd play in the dirt all the time, through being held by a landscape that really asked nothing of me as a kid but being present. So that cottage really gave me, well, the land, I should say, the cottage is just a building, but the land gave me a template for safety and for wonder and for connection. And I think, kind of as we've talked a little bit about, it was my first language. It was that sensory language of aliveness. And for me, it left a permanent imprint.
Wow. If we could all have childhood like that. Wow.
Very grateful, very grateful.
Yeah. Oh, that is so beautiful. And contrasted to, I mean, yes, you grew up in the internet age, so, I don't resonate with that because I grew up way before the internet. But it is one of the things that, um, I love that Richard Louv said, the
Mm,
author of The Last Child in the Woods, and I think that book really made many of us pivot in our careers and say, "This is important." This idea of nature deficit disorder, which is basically a numbing of our physical bodies to human
mhm.
experience, is really important, and it is part of our life path that we need to do something about that, the way humanity has been, devolving, really. And one of the things he said was, technology is great. I mean, we need technology to do what we're doing, No one is saying that technology is bad.
Mm-mm.
All about balance.
Yes.
And if we don't balance this hyper technology in our lives, we are doing ourselves a tremendous disservice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love your language, Maureen, of numbness. I think we live in an era that is built to distract, is built to occupy, and we've gotten less, what is the word I should say? But we're not nearly as good at being bored. But it's maybe a question for myself, what is boredom? And really it comes down to a stillness. We're not good at being still anymore. And it's a story I'm sure many people listening have, where as I got older, life became faster. It was busier. I started spending more time indoors, more time achieving, but less time listening. I noticed that my focus would slip when I hadn't been outside, and my mood would drop if I skipped my walks. And suddenly you find yourself craving, which, as you spoke about with Richard Louv and nature deficit disorder, I found myself craving the quiet of trees, probably the way some people wake up craving that first sip of coffee in the morning. And that curiosity for me really slowly turned into a question over the years of what is nature actually doing to us and with us, under our skin and in our body and in our spirit.
Yeah. There is such a powerful presence when we allow ourselves to be quiet
Yes.
in nature. I mean, quiet anywhere.
Quiet anywhere. Quiet anywhere. Even if it's, I know for myself, right? Like you said, technology is a great tool and there's really good things that serve us right now. And we can touch on it later. But I mean, I use technology every day in my practice to help people connect to nature. And for me, after this call, will I try and go for a short walk in my local park? Absolutely. Because it's going to give me a good chance to really take in our conversation, think about it, reflect on it. And that is a really beautiful thing that I consider myself lucky where I live that I have access to some nearby green space, which is something that we know a lot of people don't.
Yeah. That is such a challenge for so many people that live in our urban centers. I mean, even suburbia
Yeah.
where I live and I grew up, but this is my home and I love Long Island, New York. I mean, I love the proximity to New York City. I used to work there, so I understand a bit of the urban spaces. I could never live in a city. And suburbia is a real challenge too. People think, "Oh, you've got you've got yards and you've got." Yeah, it's better, but there is just so much overdevelopment and insanity in
Mhm. Mhm.
suburbia.
Well, and that's the urban conversation is something I find myself being drawn into a lot more as of late because as I kind of became busier and I got into my undergraduate degree and I started digging into that science on connecting with nature, that actually became the topic of my honors thesis. I collaborated with researchers like Dr. John Zelensky here in Ottawa and Dr. Mark Berman at the University of Chicago, studying how even brief exposure to green space and what we focused on was the order and the disorder in our environment. We know the built environment is very orderly, lots of straight lines. You don't actually see that in nature. You don't see straight lines and 90-degree angles in nature. And so what we were looking at was could that order and disorder of the environment actually affect how charitable we were, how likely we were to support our fellow humans and research, you know, wasn't mind-blowingly significant, but really showed this great trend towards when we're looking at natural spaces, we are drawn to be kinder to our fellow human. And I don't think a shortage of more kindness would be warranted anytime today. We need more kindness in our world, and nature can do that. And we know it. We feel more at peace. We feel more our heart rate regulate, our nervous system regulate, like we talked about earlier. And that is the power of just being back in the space that we belong in.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this idea of being more calmed in nature than we are in indoor environments typically, uh, it just made me go back to my training as a feng shui practitioner
Mm,
and the yin and the yang. And something triggered a thought in me, and it's just really confirming it. So when we're in interior spaces, it is very, very structured, linear. It promotes the linear thinking. It is the more masculine approach, right? So it's the mind, it's the mental activity. And when we're in outdoors, it's variety,
mhm,
it's curves, it's the feminine, it's the intuitive,
yes,
and it promotes working from here.
mhm. There's a yin energy to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
And for most of us, um, we are more comfortable, or maybe not comfortable. We are more open-hearted when we're in outdoor. environment. Something that, you know, is tragic, I feel, is the fact that some people are so biophobic.
Yeah, yeah, we hear so much about the biophilic space and the biophilic design and how a really small community of us, the two of us included, are really trying to promote that yin energy, those curves, that femininity in spaces, get away from that linearity, yang dominating nature. And yeah, biophobic is an interesting one. I've given a couple of talks on it over the years, and there's two kind of main concepts I usually talk to people about, and one of them is something called environmental generational amnesia, which is something that happens with something called shifting baseline syndrome. And basically, to boil it down, you don't know what you don't know. So if my childhood is in the heart of downtown Toronto, which is incredibly nature poor, there are barely any green spaces except for a local parquet, which is a blessing if you even have that. But really, it's concrete, concrete, and more concrete, and a little bit of glass. And if I'm a kid growing up in that environment, deprived of all access to nature, I don't have a family that takes me to access nature. What does that look like? I grew up not knowing what it's like to feel the breeze of a forest when you walk in and you've gone from an asphalt hot environment to you get into the forest and suddenly it's cool. You can smell and taste the moisture in the air, the smell of all the essential oils hitting your nose. You don't know that. So nature can actually be incredibly intimidating for you. And as more and more generations come to pass and they don't know what they've lost, that is that is the nature deficit disorder at work. And this is something that even when you look at countries like Scotland, Scotland used to be quite heavily forested. And of course, over centuries, I think their forest cover got down to something dramatic like 6% or 7%. It was very, very little of the country. And they've now recognized the need for that, not only from a public health perspective, but of course, a climate risk perspective. And they are really, really pushing to plant more trees and bring back more shrubbery and bring back more of that native grassland and things that we've lost. So we do we do see the biophobic aspect is a consequence of our urban design choices. And that is where I actually just it's coming out tomorrow, which is good timing, but published an article in the Canadian Planners Institute, which is the quarterly newsletter that goes out for all of the urban planners in Canada, and really trying to get them to see that they may be urban planners, but they are public health advocates, and the choices they make shape Canadian experiences. They shape the health of our nation and our residents. So they really need to start thinking about themselves as making choices to increase risk of diabetes or not, increase people getting outside and being physically active and reducing their risk of heart disease and cancers, etc. If you design the urban environment in a way that mimics what we intrinsically know is that we are part of nature.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah. I had no idea that you had that part of your work in this way. It just, it's amazing how sometimes topics just come up that are absolutely perfectly timed. I would love, are you able to share that with the public, that article?
I absolutely will be once the embargo is lifted tomorrow. It's
Yes, certainly.
I'm really
So
excited.
by the time this airs, it will be
It's
in
gonna be
the public venue. If you could share that, I would love to put that in the show notes below.
absolutely. Thank
Okay.
you, Maureen.
All right. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that it is such, I love how you phrased it that urban planners are um, health advocates. Absolutely.
It's something I think ultimately I would love to see as part of the curriculum. I think the conversation is starting to happen in the digital sphere. I certainly know the conversation is starting to happen in the companies that I'm having conversations with. But I would really love to see that aspect that we are all working together to create an environment that supports everybody, no matter your mobility access, your mobility needs, you are able to it. And that's something I'm trying to be really mindful in my language. It's very simplistic to say, get out in nature, but maybe I'm homebound and because of mobility concerns, I'm unable to leave my home. So how do we advocate to bring the nature in? And, for me, I've got all my plants around me too. That is something in every room of the house. I try and have my plants because I feel the difference when I go visit somewhere and there's no plants and I'm kind of going, oh, it's missing something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Bringing live plants into our buildings, that is the number one thing that I do when I work with clients is to promote that. And so often I have clients that say, "Oh, I don't have a green thumb and I kill everything." Well, that is just a story they're telling themselves.
Mhm.
They probably didn't get the right type of plants. And, because there are some plants that are harder to care for than others.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then, of course, we have all sorts of other things. Bring in at least fresh flowers or
Yes.
yeah. So so Owen, I'm wondering if you have a specific story you'd like to share on a deep connection with nature.
Ooh, that's a good one. The childhood experiences is definitely one of the big ones that shaped me. I found actually when I got into medicine, that was that was probably the first time when so I'd done research at our local children's hospital in the past. I was focusing a lot on kind of neurology in children and the gut brain connection. And again, how what we put in our body, there's benefits for rural kids. They get sick less often because they grow up, they're in the dirt, they're not in a sterile environment. And so in terms of that deep story with nature, I think as I was going through my professional degree and really realizing whether it's pharmaceuticals that have all these different side effects, big costs, big interactions in the body, even if it's supplements and we're putting that in, they do have side effects. I started to really think, what is an intervention that's easily accessible to as many people as it can be? What is something we're all deeply missing in our lives? What is something that is cost effective and has no real interaction in the body or risk associated with it? And it was kind of at the moment I was actually out walking in the Don Valley in Toronto near the school, and it kind of clicked. I remember stopping, and there was a stream nearby, and I went, "Oh my God, it's nature. We are we are just." That's when it clicked. We are over medicalizing what, in many cases, was disconnection, not just from ourselves, but from the environments that support healing. And that realization was so. I remember it. It almost hit me like a truck or a freight train, I guess, choose your vehicle, your medium. And that was really deeply impactful. And I remember after that, I went, okay, I need to go back to the cottage and um ended up it was a long weekend, so that worked out really well. And drove home, went to the cottage, and I just was sitting. And there was a couple family members too there at the time, which was nice from the connection and the community perspective. But really my path circled back to that dock and that forest where we had played hide and seek as kids. That feeling of being small and safe and part of something alive. And I realized when I become that person's healthcare provider, when I become their doctor, I'm not here to tell people what to believe. I'm here to help them remember what their bodies already know. And if I can do that, whether it's in a clinic, a boardroom, or a podcast like this, then I think I'm doing my work. Because if someone's living in a concrete box with no green access, I now have woken up and see that as a clinical barrier to healing. And suddenly that big, deep realization was nature is not just a backdrop. It is an active participant in the healing process. It is something alive. And that's quite poignant because I just finished reading last night, so timely again, um, Finding the Mother Tree by Dr. Suzanne Simard. And oh my goodness, just all of the research that she's done and other researchers that she's collaborated with showing that the forest and nature is a complete living entity, and we are part of that, but how well-established mother trees, again, going back to that language of femininity, these well-established mother trees, if they see there's a sick sapling that's part of their larger network under the soil, they actually will send more nutrients to support that sapling and bolster its immune system. It will actually support its own kin a little more. So if it sees that it has its own saplings within that network, it's sending more nutrients to those, but not at the expense of the others, because it recognizes that sapling needs a community. So it'll help support trees that aren't even the same species. And reading that book was really deeply and powerful going through it because I went, that is humans. We need a community. There's a loneliness epidemic. We don't feel connected anymore. We are more connected than ever, but more lonely than ever because it's those digital connections, which are important, as you said earlier, but a piece of the puzzle. And yeah, I felt quite emotional going through the book. Had to put it down a number of times because it just brought back so much of the memory of childhood and being at that lake and having all my cousins around me and the big family reunions where we had 60, 70, 80 people and just feeling as a kid so loved and so supported in an environment where everyone was present. It was, yeah, it was quite impactful.
Wow. I have two questions.
Mhm.
So when you were, just back at that experience of being in Toronto with this idea in your head of how can you, work on this paper better, what ideas are coming to you, and you suddenly stopped and noticed the stream. You talk about being like hit by a truck, kind of. There is this really physical bodily sense when we have these epiphanies that is unmistakable.
Mhm.
We're not just here. We're not just feeling. We are feeling this inspiration, perhaps. We're picking it up from the field around us. It's like so many people that I've interviewed on this podcast and continue to interview are people who do Jungian psychology,
Mhm.
ecopsychology, as you and I are both uh, very much aware of. And they talk about how nature is speaking to us all the time. And I believe that when we're out in nature and we are impacted in that way, we're getting that signal that nature is like trying to reach out to us all the time. But when we're so in here, we don't hear it. We don't feel it until we do. Some way there's a crack
Mhm.
in our thought pattern that allows it to come through and we're just illuminated.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. I gotta think of more nature-oriented euphemisms, but, it really is, and it was such a visceral reaction. I had goosebumps when you were talking about that inspiration because I think now when I'm in clinic for many patients, I begin by listening not only to their symptoms, but to the spaces they inhabit both physically and spiritually and mentally. Where do they spend most of their time? What does their body see? What does their body hear and smell and touch in a day? Are they waking up to sunlight or are they waking up to screen light? Do they have access to green space? Do they even know when the last time they stood barefoot on the ground was? And to them, they might seem like lifestyle questions, but they're also highly diagnostic ones because like we just said, how we feel is often a reflection of how we're living in relationship to our environment. And what does that look like? And so after that, of course, maybe we have a conversation and we try to co-create nature-based prescriptions that are tailored to their reality. And that might be as simple as a 10-minute walk under the tree before work, or maybe it's a standing commitment to get morning light on their skin, I don't know, within an hour of waking, or choosing the shady side of a building for their lunch break because it's really hot in the office. And whether it's people dealing with insomnia or hormonal regulation, dysregulation, I really try and use sunlight timing as part of circadian rhythm repair. For those with burnout or grief, it's really trying to suggest that slow nature immersion, sitting quietly in a forested area, even just once a week, to let the nervous system actually unwind. And if you look at kids and patients who are neurodivergent, we lean into more sensory play and that unrestricted time outdoors, not as a reward, but as medicine, because sometimes the most impactful healing thing I can prescribe is 20 minutes of puddle jumping or cloud watching. And I think what surprises a lot of people is watching how quickly their bodies respond. And you see shifts in cortisol and mood and even chronic pain lessens when people start reconnecting with nature consistently. So it's not, it goes so far beyond physiology. You get back to that real spiritual connection of, in what did humans evolve in? How did we grow up? Um, it's so subtle what happens. People begin to feel held, is often language that I've used in the past. They start to remember that they're part of something larger. They feel less alone. And just like with that mother tree analogy, right? They feel connected to it. It is relational. Nature is relational medicine.
Wow. Yes. And this is part of the evolutionary process that we're in right now, this transformational process. I think humanity is awakening more than ever to understanding our multi-dimensional selves, and things are not working. Even though they're tearing down at a very quick rate and it feels scary out there, we have to recognize that we are needing to
Mhm.
change things in order to break through to what is important to us as a species in our relationship with everything in this universe, um, to that tree that's right outside our window,
Mhm.
to the roses that we pass on our way to the car or the bus stop, right? There's just so much beauty out there that we've ignored,
And it's
many of us.
too many of us. I've been on a mission in my own home to try and rip up as much lawn as I can. I've quickly come around to realizing, well, this doesn't serve biodiversity very well. So every year I try and rip up, 1 foot more, 1 foot more. And it is amazing already. Actually, what amazed me last summer, and I can't wait for this summer. Last year we actually had fireflies in our backyard, and we're going to the cottage and seeing the fireflies at night, hundreds of them. And then again, kind of as life changes, that disappeared. And so it was seeing them for the first time. I went, no way. Was that a blink out of the corner of my eye? Or did I just see a firefly in a suburban neighborhood? And it made me feel really good because it was almost as though nature was recognizing the effort and trying to plant more cosmos and milkweed to support monarch butterflies and really making active choices. Some sumac, which we now have at year 3. So this year we're really excited because it should start producing a fruiting body so that through the winter, the birds in our neighborhood will have that additional food source as well. And it's something I feel very lucky to talk about in my day-to-day work and across all spectrums and sectors. But to see it in my own home brought back something so visceral. I actually have goosebumps talking about it right now. But The amount of bugs that we've seen has really, really sparked a need and a desire that I want everyone to do this. I'm going to probably become that person who goes, did you know your lawn? You need to rip it all up, which I probably already am.
There is a challenge that I saw on Instagram, the lawn challenge, but it is all about this obsession with green lawns and how we can start kind of moving away from that. And one thing that has been kind of over the last few years, the recognition that we rake our leaves so there's no leaves around because there's also pressure from neighbors, right?
Mhm.
That's another thing. It's the social pressure of leaving leaves around or not having that beautiful green lawn. And it's crazy. So by leaving the leaves in place,
Mhm.
I've actually had to say to my husband, please don't rake yet. Please
Yes.
don't rake yet.
Sure.
Please don't rake yet. Leave it until May. And he'll be like, I just want to get out there and clean it up.
Itchy.
And, so I was able to get him not to do it in certain garden beds and certain
Perfect.
areas.
Compromise.
But what, like you just said, we also did that the year before, and we saw more of those fireflies. And it was thrilling. Talking about being a child again, feeling playful, and there's just this joy when you see fireflies in the summer.
There it is.
It brings so much memory back for those of us who actually grew up with them.
Mhm.
And that's another thing, because there's plenty of children out there, I'm sure plenty of adults who don't know what we're talking.
No. No. And it really brings that big question of what does it mean to live, to heal in the right relationship with nature? And I mean, I've worked in pediatric research. I realized quickly after that epiphany, I didn't want to live only in data. I love science. It comes with the territory, but I also love dirt and I love stories and I love stillness. And I found myself asking kind of, how do I bring all of this together? And that's what led to my work now, where you're trying to bridge the clinical with the poetic. You're trying to bridge the empirical with the embodied. And because what I saw time and time again, whether it was hospitals or clinics or conferences, we are treating bodies without treating the environment, and we are addressing symptoms without restoring rhythm. And that does not work at
Yeah.
all. And we want to bring back that sense of awe and wonder. And even for me right now, being surrounded by my friends and their young kids, I have so much fun when I put on my big rubber boots and I'm pulling them up and, I'm trying to get other friends into it, but I'm jumping in the puddles with kids because it's just dirt. You can clean your clothes. And at the end of the day, that kid is now growing up, having a really strong relationship with the land around them. And they see it as playful and they see it as fun and a place of presence.
Oh, so beautiful, Owen. You're doing the work that your soul was meant to do.
Trying. Yeah.
And there's much more to do.
Much
I am
more.
sure. No,
Many years ahead.
that is what is so, I think, joyful for me is where I am right now is part of the path, but there's more to discover.
Absolutely.
There's more to do. There's more projects to get me excited and go in this direction or that direction. Um, there is so much more excitement and enthusiasm and joy for our future
Yes.
because it will be beautiful, and it is beautiful.
I think we're
We do have some bumps in the road, but that is the human way.
that is the human way. I mean, I look at my colleagues and we're trained to think of ourselves of care, right, as pills and supplements and charts and protocols. But some of the deepest healing that I've seen happens outside of that model, right? We know it. We know on a trail, in a garden, in silence. That's wild care. That has a place in medicine, and people think nature is out there, something you visit on weekends, but nature is here. It's the window view, the air quality, the tree that you love on your street, and every time you walk by it, just brings you that little moment of, wow, that's a really nice tree. We don't need everyone to move to the woods. We don't. We need everyone to bring nature into our cities and our schools and our workspaces and our clinics. And I think that's when you're really, really going to see public health impacts happen at a bigger scale.
That sounded like a wrap up to me, but I will allow you to give some last words if you'd like to share something.
I would just say to everyone listening, just remembering that you're a sensory being, and when you're on your screens and your devices, right, that takes away a lot of those aspects. So just give yourself permission and pause, walk, reconnect, because all of that is going to be part of reconnecting with the land around you.
Beautiful words, beautiful advice to all of you that are listening. And I would love to hear your thoughts. Please comment below. We will respond. Please like and share, and of course, subscribe if this is a topic that you're interested in. So thank you so much, Owen, for coming on today. It has been a delight.
My pleasure, Maureen. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being a part of the Enchanted Earth podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so that you'll know when we publish another inspiring episode. Check out my book, The Enchanted Earth, available wherever online books are sold. Thank you and have a magical day.